They say I've shed innocent blood. What's blood for if not for shedding? Here's your look at the brand new Trick or Treat Studios Scream Grades Candyman Farewell to the Flesh. Candyman. Candyman. That's a bit of a tongue twister, isn't it? Try saying that 5 times fast. On second thought, maybe that's not a good idea. What is a good idea, though, is as I take the tape measure, I'd like to thank the folks over at Trick or Treat Studios that did provide this sample of the brand new Scream Greats Wave 1 Candyman Farewell to the Flesh Candyman himself, that we could have a look at this review. The figure stands exactly 8 inches in height, or he's going to be about 20 centimeters tall. All week long, we've looked at the Scream Greats, courtesy of the folks over at Trick or Treat Studios. We started things off first with the 1978 Halloween Michael Myers. We followed things up then off to Motel Hell, where we looked at Farmer Vincent. And then just yesterday, in fact, based on the time of actually posting these videos, we also looked at the Killer Clowns from Outer Space, Shorty. Now, Tony Todd's Candyman is about the same size, I would say, as Farmer Vincent, although, again, he's not wearing a pig mask. He's a lot taller than Michael Myers. He's a whole lot taller than Shorty from Killer Clowns. Candyman and Shorty, though, have a lot in common, and not just their love for sweets. Both the figures also come included with no accessories at all. Now, Candyman does have technically his calling card, the hook on the end of his forearm, but considering that's not something that's removable, I really wouldn't put that in the category of accessories. His design, though, is based on the original Candyman from Candyman 2, Farewell to the Flesh. I feel to be the superior sequel to the original one. Obviously, I would always recommend, if you've never had the chance to watch the Candyman films, start obviously with the first one, find more enjoyment at least with the second one, and then just wish you never watched the third one after you finish viewing it. This third one is garbage. The second one, though, has an interesting aspect because it incorporates the backstory of Candyman, having his hand cut off, being doused in honey, and being called Candyman. He's stung by bees. I get, of course, a lot of that when you get this release from the Scream Grades line. Now, I know I've heard some people say that this doesn't look at all like Tony Todd. I will say, though, in hand, it looks a lot more like the actor than when we saw images first online. The packaging even does give him a more slightly shinier complexion, which I might think is the one thing that's throwing off the likeness of the actor. If you were to say, look at the figure, and I get a closer look at him showing you guys what his head sculpt looks like, short of maybe the fact that his forehead is maybe just a little bit too long, I think from certain sides, it looks a lot more like Tony Todd in hand than it did online. And again, it may have something to do with the fact that his complexion was a little more shinier. Even with, some have even described it as a sweatier complexion. But the fact that they went with more of the matte finished paint definitely, I think, helps to really get this guy a better looking likeness than what we first thought. I mean, from certain sides, I think from the sides at least of the head sculpt, I think is where you really see more Tony Todd than when you're looking at it straight forward. I think it's still, for what it is, a good looking likeness. It just isn't hitting the marks as closely as they could. It's a harder thing, too, obviously, when you're doing a character when it's based on an actor. I mean, it's so very easy to do Farmer Vincent because he's wearing a pig mask. I mean, obviously wanting to land the Dawn Post likeness of the mask for the Captain Kirk. I mean, a Michael Myers is wearing a mask, and of course you got the craziness of a killer clown. This is one of those figures where getting a closer likeness to the actor is ever more imperative. But I think for what it is, I think it's a pretty good likeness. Is it 100%? I don't think I would say that. But I would say, in all honesty, I mean, it looks a lot better in hand than what it did look online. Obviously, this one also has the longer or bigger fur collar piece for his jacket. The fur also runs all the way down the middle section of his jacket. He's one of the things that Candyman is really known for having is a very long coat. This one also happens to be printed on the back, trademark 2023. I don't think any of the other figures that I've looked at, unless I really wasn't looking for them, had the trademark stamping. It may just have something to do with the fact that he has the longer jacket. It's very easy then to make out where they put the trademark stamping. Now, this one also, like the other figures, is going to be very limited in articulation. Most of these figures for the Scream Grades have only really had articulation at the base of their neck with using the ball joints. They've had hinge joints here for the shoulders. Usually they've had it for the hands. For the case here of Candyman, you really can't rotate the claw. You can rotate this hand, although it was a little tighter getting it out of the packaging. I had to heat it up just a little bit. One thing I really like also about this figure is the fact that they've done a nice job on the claw. The little hook that he has on the end, you can see has little indentations there. They even took the time to sculpt the little nails that they embed the hook in when they embedded into the stump of what was left behind of his hand. I really think they've done a nice job there. Yes, they probably could have used a little bit of extra blood on the end of the actual hook. I mean, it's something I probably could easily go in and do myself. but maybe I don't think it really necessarily needs anything. Now, I did say that this figure didn't have any real accessories to come include with them. I thought one thing that would be also fun if they had included like little translucent bee pieces, something they, for example, I mean, obviously you can't open up the jacket. This is all one sculpted piece. But if maybe they had added like little clear translucent pieces for bees that they could just have attached on, literally just like something that could have hooked around his arm and maybe just clipped around his waist, that would have had like little sculpting indicators that those could be even bees. Just something they could clip around his body. Head sculpt, again, is good. It's close enough, I feel, to being a likeness to Tony Todd. Again, it looks, I feel, a little bit better from the sides than it maybe does from the front. The coloring, really, again, for what it is a really nice, well-painted figure. The paint around his eyes, for example, is really cleanly done. I mean, the sections for his eyebrows, for example, I don't see really any paint problems where the paint is bled onto things. Like, white would be one thing that very easily could find its way then onto his fur collar, and yet the collar and the shirt underneath are really clean on this guy. Obviously the fur runs down the middle. We already looked at that. It also has found its way on the end of its form as well. Now, there's no posability here. I thought maybe they may have put in some swiveling there, but no, while there's nicely sculpted, there's no at all posability for this figure, no articulation, at least for there. The bottoms of his jacket also does have the fur collar rim, and he doesn't have actually no articulation in his feet. This is one thing I've noticed consistently with all these Scream grades so far. Michael Myers didn't have it. Farmer Vincent didn't also have any articulation, and neither did Shorty from Killer Clowns. But what he does have, at least, that Shorty didn't have, is peg holes in the undersides of his feet. I still wish that this figure line could have come included with display stands. I know, truth be told, Shorty really wouldn't have had the means to actually attach onto his display stand. So far, funny enough, he's the only figure that actually hasn't had peg holes. It's strange that they decided to put it on every other figure, except for Shorty. Speaking of the articulation, though, or going back to the articulation end of things, when it comes to Candyman's, his head is once again going to be on ball joints, so it does rotate, or allow the head to rotate all the way around. The head looks down, and it looks up. It moves a lot freer. It has the luxury of articulation like Michael Myers and Farmer Vincent had. I mean, when we looked at Shorty's was a little bit more limited. But you can see, like Tony Todd, for example, his head very easily rotates as the Candyman. Where it's going to be a little bit more limited is the section right around his fur collar. Easily you can bring his arms out, so that's not a problem at all there. I mean, you can bring him out at 90 degrees, or a little less than 90 degrees. Trying to rotate his arm around the collar is obviously going to be the harder thing. I mean, it gets the job done, but it's very tight to try to rotate the arm all the way around, just because it's going to be running up against the side of the fur collar. He has no articulation here in the wrist, or any articulation here for the first sleeve. No articulation here, at least for the section of his hook hand, but he has it at least on this side, where you can move it back and forth. And the figure doesn't have, again, any articulation here. So from the sense of his neck down, I mean, when it comes to Candyman, he only really has articulation here in the shoulders and in one of his hands. And that's fine. I don't really expect the figures to have a whole lot of posability. They have what I think is the most important thing, the charm factor, the fact that we are just getting these slightly more limited articulation granted figures. I mean, when we've looked at the old movie Maniac figures, that really, I think this line is sort of the kind of the passing of the torch, the passing of the baton, so to speak. What we got with the movie Maniacs from back in the early days of the 2000s, all of those figures were really kept to very, very limited articulation, but they had a charm to them. And I find that same similar charm has found its way also to the Scream grades that we're getting here from Trick or Treat Studios. Limited, yes, on articulation, but I think that they have really nice looks to them. I mean, Candyman obviously is going to be the one, at least from the four figures. I mean, I guess I really shouldn't even technically count Shorty. He's the figure of all the ones we've looked at so far that maybe the likeness isn't 100%. But I think still the fact that we are getting ourselves a brand new Candyman for starters, and the fact it's based on my favorite of the Candyman films, Farewell to the Flesh, I think, to be fair, Trick or Treat Studios has done a good job on a Candyman here. He doesn't have any accessories, yes. I mean, sure, there's always the opportunity that they could include display stands down the road. But from what we're getting 4 figures in, and we still have, another 3-4 figures still to look at from the Scream grades, I'm loving this line so far. I don't know, maybe because I'm looking at this line being a follow-up to the original movie Maniacs line from the 2000s, I'm a little more accepting of the likeness not being 100%. I think there's enough here of Candyman that you know right away who the character is. Even if it doesn't look 100% like Tony Todd, I will say, though, getting it in hand, it looks a lot more like Tony than it did with the images we first saw online. until you actually sometimes see these figures in hand or even through reviews like this, it might give you a better idea of really how they actually will look if you're planning to pick the figures up for yourself. But having the fur collar on the top of his jacket, the long tail jacket, of course, that he has, and the very famous trademark hook that he has on the end of his forearm, there's again enough there that you know who the character is when you put this guy on your shelf. He's going to be, again, limited when it comes to articulation. Usually with all these figures we've seen so far, it's heads, it's shoulders, and in hands. But obviously with Candyman, you have to deduct one of those hands just by the fact he has a hook. The hook doesn't, from what I can see, actually swivel. I didn't want to force it just for the risk that something ended up breaking, but it seems like only one of his hands can actually rotate. And again, I'm fine for that. For what we're actually getting with this line so far, the fact that they are, again, limited, a little bit more limited articulation, I think still there's a lot of charm with this line so far. Now, obviously, I have taken a break from Killer Clowns for right now, looking at Candyman. We will be going back, though, to Killer Clown Country, looking at both Slim and Fatso. We also will be looking at Candy Corn's Jacob Atkins. So if you guys are a big fan of Candy Corn, he was also one of the additions to the Scream Greats Wave 1. And of course, as already announced, they are also doing a Scream Greats Wave 2. I don't know if he's actually part of the wave, but also advertised over on their site, they're also doing Pumpkinhead. Yes, very excited for that Pumpkinhead. But a big thank you nonetheless, once again, to the folks over at Trick or Treat Studios that did provide this sample of the not the Killer Clowns, the Candyman, Farewell to the Flesh, Tony Todd's Candyman, and we can have a look at this review. What do you guys think of the likeness? Let me know down below in the comments section. Do you think it looks enough like Tony Todd? Certainly weigh your thoughts on whether you've either picked the figure up or based on this review, if this is a figure that you could see yourselves picking up. Also, again, if you guys are interested and would like to get any one of these figures from the Scream Greats for yourself, you can click the link down below that will take you directly over to Trick or Treat's territory. And from there, of course, you can order either Tony Todd, you can order an entire wave, really, if you want to, because I think all of them are currently in stock as of right now. In the meantime, though, if you guys did enjoy this video, I want to hit with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and you're on board to see the remaining reviews of the Scream Greats Wave 1, that will again include Slim, Fatso from Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and also we will be looking at Jacob Atkins from Candy Corn. I might maybe break up Killer Clowns just a little bit. I might probably do one of the Killer Clowns, then we'll look at Jacob Atkins, then we'll probably look at the other Killer Clowns, probably in, I would imagine, somewhat of that order. But definitely going to be a lot more videos coming your way, guys. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.